So we have a lot to cover today, and so I'm just going to dive right in. And at the end, as Michelle said, I'm happy to take your questions. So, Phantoms of Asia, Contemporary Awakens the Past. As you know, this is the Asian's first large-scale exhibition of contemporary art. And a lot of people have asked me, how did we arrive here? Well, the process began, as I mentioned, about 2 years ago, when Jay introduced his new artistic vision to the museum, and we began to think about what this meant for contemporary art. So Jay's vision, which I'm sure you've seen a number of times, has a lot to do with interconnectivity between artistic ideas in Asia and the rest of the world, but also throughout time. He wants to connect traditional Asian art to present-day developments, so that means the art practice of today. We also want to serve the San Francisco Bay Area by connecting art to life. And we want to use contemporary art as a way to recontextualize and complement our existing collection of traditional Asian art that you all are so familiar with. So some of you are probably thinking, contemporary what? What does this mean for a group of docents who have spent years learning about this museum's collection of traditional Asian art? So I've thought a lot about this, and I thought that the best way to address this question is to share some of my own experiences with you. So after all, my focus since college has been on art of primarily the last 100 years, so I can kind of relate to how you might feel, because when I arrived at this museum, I really had no idea of how to approach or address some of the ancient objects in our collection. I also realized that there's a wide range of experience with contemporary art in this room, so I thought if you'd indulge me a few minutes, I'd like to just bring it back to basics for a moment. I know that contemporary art can be challenging. In fact, I thought I would share with you some of my own confessions about contemporary art. Sometimes I have no idea what I am looking at. Sometimes I just don't get it. Sometimes I think, I could have done that. I don't say it, but I think it. And sometimes I just don't want to sit in the dark listening to ambient noise for 20 minutes and pretend it's genius. Sometimes contemporary art frustrates me, annoys me, scares me, disgusts me, or even bores me. And this is why I love it. So let's delve a little deeper into this point. Why do I love contemporary art? Why do I love art that can disgust me or bore me, or that might seem totally inaccessible? Well, if we look back at each one of my confessions, I think you might start to understand why contemporary can be so exciting. Sometimes I have no idea what I'm looking at. Well, I'd say that contemporary art is about pushing limits. It's about showing you something that you haven't seen before, or making you think about the world from a new perspective. This is a detail of a work in Phantoms of Asia by Korean artist Adrian Wong. Looking at this image, you can probably discern that the material here is wood, and that these forms resemble mountains. And maybe you can tell that this mountain-like landscape exists in the middle of an everyday table. The entire piece is machine-milled and then finished by hand. And when you learn more about this piece, you'll know that these forms are actually generated by graphs of the artist's brainwaves. So this work pushes limits on many levels, I would argue, and makes you see a number of things from a new perspective. Maybe it blurs lines between functional objects and art objects. Maybe it makes you think about technology as a part of artistic practice. Maybe it makes you think about associations between the brain or mind and the landscape, both being places for reflection, for example. Sometimes I just don't get it. Well, contemporary art is often about asking questions rather than giving answers, and oftentimes there really isn't an answer to get. Some works want you to think. All works, I think, want you to feel, to respond, and contemporary art can really make you work. Many contemporary works, and this is especially true of those in Phantoms of Asia, are open-ended. They intentionally change with the environment that they are in. This is a film still by a Thai artist who goes by the name Arya. And here you see the artist standing in front of a chalkboard, and she's teaching a seminar about death. And her audience are a bunch of shrouded corpses. And yes, these are actual corpses. Many people, especially from non-Buddhist backgrounds, have some problems with this work. They find it disrespectful to use deceased people in artwork, for example. Yet from the Theravadan Buddhist perspective, Arya's performance has been understood as a way of caring for the deceased after bodily death. And as you'll see when you watch this video, Arya asks many questions to her audience. She asks them how they died, what their expectations are of the afterlife. And in doing this, by extension, the artist is asking the viewer to consider these questions in their own life. She doesn't provide any answers. She's interested in how these perspectives and our responses change with the audience that is standing before the work. And understandably, an audience in Bangkok may have a very different reaction than an audience in San Francisco or Berlin, for example. In this sense, there are no right or wrong answers to the question of what is this work about, or what is the artist trying to say. She's trying to provoke. She's setting up conditions for her viewers to respond, to consider their own thoughts on the subject of death. Sometimes I think I could have done that. So I like to think I have a pretty intelligent group of friends. But every time I'm looking at art with them, invariably someone says, I could have done that. Why is that so great? And even though I've already admitted that sometimes I do say this to myself, in this situation, my answer is always the same. Focus on the idea. Don't just focus on the visual. And I'd also add to this that I always say, assume everything is intentional. This is a work by a Bangalore-based artist, Prabhavati. You're probably thinking that it looks like a primed canvas, and you're right, it does. And that's the point. As you get closer to this work, however, you'll start to see very subtle lines emerge from the canvas. They're very minimal, and the closer you get, the more detail you start to notice. Prabhavati embeds copper wire into gessoed panels. She comes from a family of goldsmiths based in Bangalore, and she uses the traditional tools and materials of their goldsmithing and metalworking techniques to create her works. But these tools and materials are really not the point. Of course, there is an aspect of this work that has to do with that dialogue with the past. But really, I would say that with these works, those tools and materials and that use of tradition is really a means to an end. It's a way of getting at the idea she's trying to express. She's trying to create a work that is meditative, that requires close looking, and that's abstract enough to be open-ended so that each viewer can have his or her own visceral or emotional reaction with this pared-down canvas. For those of you who might be familiar with Agnes Martin's work, I think her work provide a very good precedent for thinking about what Prabhavati is trying to do. These are just lines on canvas, but as you might agree, there's so much more going on here. It's really only the beginning. Sometimes I just don't want to sit in the dark listening to ambient noise and pretend it's genius. We've all been there. Contemporary art embraces subjectivity. We can agree to like or dislike works. We can agree and disagree about successes or failures, meanings or interpretations. You might be turned off by one or all of the works that I talk about today. Contemporary art is not bound by connoisseurship or iconographic meanings in the way that some traditional work might be. Any reaction is a valid reaction. But is this really true about only contemporary art? I would argue that all art is about subjectivity. As docents who interface with many visitors, you probably know this better than anyone. So if I can distill these points down to a few simple reminders, I would say the following. Look first, ask next. Trust your eyes and spend time looking before you go to the label. Find that one thing. If there's something that grabs you, even if it seems insignificant, go with it. Think about it and why it's there. Assume that it's important. Be comfortable not knowing all the answers. There may not even be an answer. But also keep in mind that there are no bad questions. It's not often about the who, what, when, where, or why, but about the feelings, the associations, or that a work conjures for you. Finally, and most importantly, you already have all the tools you need to talk about contemporary art. And everything I've set up to now is really to arrive at this last point. All over the Asian Art Museum, there is art that is about pushing limits, about feelings, emotions, and responses, and about asking questions and exploring the world or providing new perspectives. Isn't this what art has always been about? The 20th century might have thrown some rules out the window, but when you look past the strange materials and the unusual practices, I believe that art today and throughout time has been about expressing ideas that language cannot fully articulate, or exploring concepts that we might not know how to access or talk about. And this idea of using art to explore what we might not fully know is exactly what Phantoms of Asia is all about. So with these general thoughts on contemporary art in mind, let's talk about the exhibition. Phantoms of Asia is an ambitious exhibition exploring the complex, diverse, cross-cultural perspectives of Asian cosmology and spirituality through a compelling interplay of 140 artworks from the past and the present. The exhibition explores ways that various ancient understandings of the cosmos, nature, and spirituality continue to find expression in the practice of artists living today. The exhibition also explores how artists throughout time have used art to explore and envision the realm beyond Earth. This is a show about asking questions. Phantoms of Asia asks, where and how do we fit into the universe? Is there an energy that surrounds us, and if so, can art make it visible? What happens after death? Where will we all go after we die? How can we envision the gods? How can we access them? And where can humans go to meet the gods? The exhibition will present approximately 60 works by 31 contemporary artists, alongside 80 works from the collection, and it will use the entire museum building. In curating the exhibition, we tried to include as many countries as possible while making the thematic content of our primary concern. Some regions of Asia are not represented as well as others, such as Central Asia, for example. But in these cases, we attempted to fill in the holes with the help of our education department, who have done an excellent job with programming. I also want to make the point, and this might seem obvious, but these artists in the exhibition do not represent their home country in the way that one might expect in a biennial type of format, for example. In fact, I've found that many of these artists don't identify as Asian contemporary arts at all. They simply think of themselves as artists. This is a good point to keep in mind for our visitors. The artworks represent individual explorations of the themes explored in this exhibition. They are not reflections of all art coming out of a certain region. For the past 17 months, I've been working on Phantoms of Asia with Mami Kataoka. If you haven't met her already, I understand you'll meet her in the next few weeks. Mami's an expert in international contemporary art, and this is her first exhibition working with traditional art objects. Mami and I collaborated very closely with artists in the show, and as a result, we have many new works in the exhibition. This is very exciting for us. The exhibition is structured with 4 overlapping themes, and I'll delve into each of those as we move forward. But I do want to stress that these themes are intentionally very fluid. What I mean by this is that many artworks fit into multiple themes or could easily be moved from one theme to another. Because spirituality and cosmology are vast topics, we wanted to give some structure or touchstones for our visitor as they move through the exhibition. But in fact, the journey would also make sense in a different path or in a different order. Today I'll walk you through the exhibition following the layout that Mommy and I have proposed. But as you create your own tours, you should feel the freedom to explore the exhibition in different ways, maybe focusing on one element that repeats among all 4 themes, for example. And I think this, as we begin to talk about the art and the artists, you'll see what I mean. The visitor's journey through Phantoms of Asia begins with a series of large installation pieces that set up some themes explored throughout the show. The first gallery that visitors will encounter is the Education Resource Room, which will feature a series of calendars by Singapore-born artist Heeman Chong. The title of this piece, Calendars 2020 to 2096, is a pretty good description of what it is. The artist created a calendar for the future. There are 1,001 individual sheets of paper, each representing a month of the calendar, and they'll be hung consecutively, month by month, year by year, around the Education Resource Room. Each calendar sheet includes a photograph, and the artist took these photographs between 2004 and 2009 in a vacant location, a public space, typically, somewhere in Singapore. Throughout the images, the one thing they all share is there are no people. You won't see any movement. And this is intentional. The artist wants the photographs to have a haunted presence, a sense that there's something else there that we can't fully see, but that we can sense. In an institution that typically refers back in time, Mommy and I thought it would be interesting to kick off the exhibition with an imagined vision of the future. And that's essentially what these calendars are. We wanted this gallery to be a reminder that this show is not only about how the present looks to the past, but also how the past and the present help constitute what's next in the future. This work is very much about seeing what we can, or seeing or sensing or feeling what we cannot see with our eyes around us. From here we move to Lee Gallery, which will feature also one installation by the artist Hiroshi Sugimoto. This installation is entitled 5 Elements, and it features 7 crystal pagodas. Each can be understood, as, according to the artist, as a crystal cosmos of sorts, and they take their form from the Japanese 5-element pagoda. This is a type of Buddhist stupa that was developed in the 13th century and that visualized the cosmos with stacked geometric shapes that together symbolize the 5 universals of the cosmos: earth, water, fire, wind, and emptiness. So here's an image of just one of them. They sit atop of these wooden plinths. And from the bottom we have the earth, which is a cube emphasizing materiality. Then comes the sphere representing water. And then fire in a pyramid form in imitation of pointed flames. Wind representing the hemisphere, expressing its power to cut through matter. And then finally, emptiness at the top, or formlessness, which is paradoxically in the form of a mystic gem. Sugimoto combines this ancient esoteric Buddhist view of the universe with a single film from his ongoing photographic series, Seascapes. He embeds a single film from his Seascape series in the sphere, and you can see on the image on the far right what this looks like. And the installation is illuminated from the back so that it creates a bit of a glowing effect of this image through the sphere. The image in the center here is an example in the background of that image of what one of these seascapes look like and their actual size. To Sugimoto, incorporating an image of the sea into a depiction of the cosmos, essentially, was important because not only do these photographs relate to moments of his own life, the moment in which he took that photograph, but he sees the sea as the origin of all life. So this installation shows us one understanding of the cosmos from the Asian perspective. Moving into Hambrecht Gallery, I wanted to take a minute to talk about how this gallery will be divided. It essentially has three parts. On the far left is Asian Cosmologies. In the center, the largest portion, Envisioning the Invisible. And then finally, on the far right, World and Afterworld. When you see the catalog, you'll notice that Asian Cosmologies and Envisioning the Invisible are treated as one theme. There is a lot of overlap between these two themes in the art and the ideas that are explored in them. And so in the catalog format, it made a lot of sense to incorporate them together. When it came to actually placing art in the room, we ended up dividing them up. But I think that what you'll notice is that the Asian Cosmology section provides a very good primer to understand the contemporary objects that are in that second section, Envisioning the Invisible. So starting on the far left, Asian Cosmologies. This section of the exhibition urges viewers to ask, where and how do we fit into the universe? The objects in this room were selected to stimulate thinking about the relationship between people and the cosmos. Inspiration for this section are numerous. I mean, I think we can look to Vedic conceptions of the universal spirit, where Brahman and Atman are linked together and unified by invisible forces. We can think of the cosmic man that we see in Jain imagery. We can also think about the correspondence between microcosmos in the form of the human body and a macrocosmos in the form of natural phenomena that we learn about in Confucius ideas. But what all these diverse philosophies share is really the point. Many of these ideas of the cosmos from throughout Asia share an interest in connecting conceptions of the universe, or macrocosmos, with the self, or microcosmos. And this relationship of the individual to the world around is really the key and the essence of what we are interested in and what we're trying to explore. We're not trying to say that all of these conceptions of the universe are the same, because as we all know, they're vastly different. But what we are doing is saying, let's look at the ways in which these overlaps and these interconnections come to life in the art, and then see if those overlaps and those interconnections play out in the art of today. So this is a painting, an Indian cosmological painting, 1750 to 1850, that for Mommy and me was really a focal point in thinking about this section of the exhibition. What interested us the most about this piece was that many scholars have looked at it, and they can't agree on what it is. They're really baffled by this piece. Perhaps it's a map of heavenly and earthly realms inhabited by gods, celestial beings, demons, animals. And it also clearly shows kind of the microcosmos with the macrocosmos in it. And there's these geometric lines linking the two. We can clearly see here some depictions of Vishnu, Ganesha, wild beasts, and angry demons. There's also numerous sacred symbols, such as lotuses and serpents, surrounding the many depictions of figures standing, perhaps in prayer, some think. What interested us the most about this piece is that it seems to combine a lot of traditions together, and that's why the scholars are baffled. This is a really good example of those interconnections that we're trying to explore here. We asked ourselves, how did these traditions overlap? Why did certain traditions find expression here? And what is it about the geometry that we see in this work from 1750 in India and these Han Dynasty bronze mirrors from approximately 200 BCE? I mean, to Mommy and to me, we're not experts in this, but we can see these geometries repeating and resonating among works from vastly different regions and vastly different time periods, and that's what interested us. So these Han Dynasty mirrors have patterns on them that are thought to be cosmological diagrams. And this suggestion is also supported by the inscriptions that are on them. Of course, on the other side that we're not seeing, there would be a polished surface, which is for self-reflection. So again, we see this relationship between reflecting upon the self and ideas of the broader cosmological realm surrounding. So once we started thinking about these traditional works, we began to think a little bit differently about one of the contemporary artists in the show. This is Filipino artist Poklong Anading. He creates a series of light boxes. These are 2 of 9 that are going to be on display in Hambrecht. And he photographs everyday people on the streets of Metro Manila and at some other locations, and goes up to these strangers, asks them if they would be subjects in his photograph, and gives them a circular mirror to hold in front of their face. So of course the mirror manipulates property of light and energy and reflection, and reflects back on the camera and obscures the identity, the very point of portraiture of these subjects. So he's not only manipulating our expectations of the portrait, but he's replacing that site of self-reflection, the mind, with the burst of energy that surrounds that individual subject in that moment. His work is very much about identity, about how we place ourselves in the cosmos, how we situate ourselves globally and locally. And in this case, he uses the Philippines as his locus, but I think that anyone can relate to some of the ideas that he's exploring here. It's hard not to think about transcendence and illumination when you see these bursts of energy obscuring the minds and the faces of these subjects. Before we leave Asian cosmologies, I wanted to talk for a minute about a piece that will be in the Civic Center Plaza. This is a very large sculpture. It is about 10 meters across and 24 feet high. And it's by Korean artist Jejunus. And what he's focusing on here is perhaps the most important and auspicious symbol in cosmology in Asia, the lotus. This piece is called Breathing Flower, and it's created of sheets of fabric that are sewn together and then inflated with a motor. And the petals of the lotus will slowly move up and down, mimicking the motion of an actual lotus flower. So just as in nature, and how the lotus remarkably emerges spontaneously from dark, murky waters, this Jejunus lotus, as you see here, does much the same thing. It's going to just spring out in the middle of our civic center. This is really intended to be a work of art that just makes you feel good when you see it. Of course, there are cosmological associations that we know of about the lotus, but at the end of the day, as I've been saying, I see this piece as a gesture to the city, a way to bring a burst of color and life into our neighborhood, and hopefully get a few people interested in coming across the street. So moving on to that second section of Hambrecht. This section urges viewers to ask, is there an energy that surrounds us? And if so, can we experience it or see it through art? The artworks in this gallery, both old and new, suggest ways that Asian artists have represented the unseeable realms of the cosmos with art. Often, this art acts as a devotional piece to connect the human realm to a spiritual realm. Other times, it may trace a single person or single artist's experience or journey trying to explore their own relationship to the spiritual world. For example, this is a work by N.S. Harsha, 2 paintings. We will have both of these paintings. I know they look very similar. They're actually twin paintings, but they're 2 versions that are shown together. And what we see here are hundreds of heads that are shown together, woven in a way into a single garland or mala. And these figures are dancing among eggplants. eggplants. When I first saw this painting, I said, are those really eggplants? What's going on here? Well, it turns out that they are. And what N.S. Harsha is interested in is creating a whimsical composition that reflects humans' collective existence and creates a sense of the energy, as he said, a never-ending cosmic dance that takes place around us. So what are the eggplants doing here? The eggplants are intentionally absurd. He says he's using absurdity here to express the grand illogicality of the universe. So this is a whimsical contrast to some of the more serious traditional depictions of the cosmos. But playing with this idea of our collective existence, as portrayed in Harsha's paintings, we've created a single plinth that will run the middle section long down the middle of Hambrecht Gallery, on which we will put a large group of traditional sculptural works from across Asia and across time. By installing these works together, we're intentionally trying to explode those divisions of time and place that traditionally organize, specifically traditional art objects. We want these objects to be in conversation with each other, but also with the contemporary work around them. So for example, this dancing Buddhist dakini is a poetic counterpoint to the sense of cosmic dance that is referenced in Harsha's work. An important point about these groupings, we're not trying to say that all of the works in the groupings are alike. We're also not trying to point out every single little difference among them. It's almost not even important really where they came from or when they were made. We want these traditional objects to be present, to be part of our contemporary experience, to speak to us in the here and now. And by thinking of the traditional objects in this way, we're hoping that we can find new connections, new correspondences among them, that the divisions of art history in the past sometimes prevented us from being able to see. In a museum like ours that's so expansive in its collection, we don't often have the freedom of thinking about traditional objects or any art objects in this way. So this is a nice opportunity for us to kind of sit back and think and meditate on and think about the ways that these objects might speak to each other, might recontextualize some contemporary pieces, and see new things in them. Another artist whose work is in this section of the gallery is Guo Fenyi, female artist from China. Unfortunately, she passed away in 2010. She creates these ink drawings based on mystical visions she received while in meditative state. She was a practitioner of Qigong, and this practice very much informed her work. What she's doing here is making visible the invisible insides of the energy of inside our nervous system. The piece in the middle, for example, is called ear. This is very much about a personal journey, and what we're seeing here is her own spiritual practice being documented as a work of art. Likewise, this sense of meditation and focus on the inner realm might be felt from this Thai Buddha, also display across from Guo Fenyi's drawings on that large plinth of sculptural deities. So when you enter North Court, down past the store, through the arcade, you will be confronted with a large-scale, site-specific work by this artist, Korean-based, New York-based, but Korean artist, Sung-Kei Kwak. This is a picture of an installation that she did a few years back, but she's going to be doing something very similar for us. Sun spends time in a space. She's been to our museum twice. She senses the energy of the space, tries to understand it, and meditate on it, and then make that energy visible using black masking tape as her primary medium. So what you see here is this dynamic flow of energy that she felt when she was in this particular location. Her process of art making is very much a performance. She dressed all in black. Of course, this is very time-consuming, so you'll see her here for almost 3 weeks, diligently working and meticulously placing these rolls of 3-inch black masking tape on the wall and then spontaneously ripping them off, almost in concert with the energy in that space. She calls these black masking tape installations drawings on space, and I find this to be a really interesting way to talk about the piece, because what she's doing is intentionally blurring the boundaries between the 2 dimensions of drawing and the 3 dimensions of sculpture. In her own words, she says, "My drawings are born through the communion between the material and the spiritual, wherein my own self is constantly reflected, emptying itself. Through these series of drawings on space, I visualize previously unseen space and time that existed only in our imagination and our subconscious realm." Interesting thing about this work, and this is true of many of the site-specific installations in the show, when the show's over in September, this piece will be destroyed and will exist only through its documentation. But what I love about Sun, I talked to her about this. I said, "You're going to be working for so many hours in our space. You've thought about this space for over a year. How do you feel about the fact that we're going to pull all this masking tape on the wall and wad it up like a big ball and throw it in the trash?" And she says, "Well, I don't think of it that way. I think of it as every visitor that knows the Asian Art Museum and knows that North Court will forever think of that space differently. I will forever be able to influence and change their perceptions of that space." So let's move to the second theme, world after world, living beyond living. In various Asian traditions, as you know, ideas of karma and reincarnation encourage awareness of life after death. And this section of the exhibition departs from those ideas. This is the video that I talked about earlier by Aria, where she is giving a lecture, a seminar to corpses about death. This video will kick off the exhibition. Will kick off this section of the exhibition. It'll be shown together with this Korean painting, King of Hell, approximately 1600 to 1700. It offers a counterpoint to Aria's video and the larger theme of death and afterlife that this section of the exhibition highlights. This painting offers a reinterpretation of Buddhist conceptions of death and reincarnation by depicting one of the 10 kings of hell. There's an excellent label and a lot of information on this painting on our website, in the collection section of our website, if you're interested in knowing more about what's going on here, specifically in this painting. So from here, you'll walk out of Hambrecht, and you'll be in the Vincent Nook end of North Court. And in Vincent Nook, we're pleased to be installing this work, as you see on the right, installed in a different location, from the Indonesian artist Jompet. It's called Anno Domini, and it's a performative installation that includes sound and small video, and it consists of 5 bodiless Javanese soldiers, represented only through the pieces of their uniforms that you can see hanging here on the right. So Java has a syncretic culture. It has a blend of many different influences and has throughout its long history. The soldiers for Jompet are symbols of this syncretic culture. So the soldiers that you see here, their costumes combine Hindu, Islamic, Western, and local dress, as well as the history of Dutch colonialism in that region. To the artist, he sees these soldiers as the symbolic protectors of that rich, blended past. And he told me, and you can read about this online as well, that to this day, outside of the royal palaces in Java, these soldiers still stand there symbolically guarding the palace. And to the artist, this is very much about memory. It's about holding on to the past and about accepting the blended reality of their present day culture and identity. So how does this relate to afterlife? Well, of course, these are ghostly bodies. But I think that really this work takes the theme of afterlife to a more conceptual plane, thinking of the past that is still very much present among us. The afterlife section will also show a series of light boxes by another artist from Manila, Ringo Bonoan. And Ringo is a female artist who she's very interesting. She sees herself as a researcher and an artist and a curator. She's an archivist. She's taking it upon herself to really archive the emergence of contemporary art in the region. This is a work called Passage, the Blanket Project, and it was created at an ashram in Nepal. The artist lived in Nepal for a few years, and then when she was about to leave in 2007, she collaborated with the terminally ill and elderly residents of this ashram to create this performance that lasted only one afternoon. So the light boxes that you'll see in North Court are just documentation. They're film stills of that performance. She asked the residents to bring their blankets out to the courtyard of the ashram and roll them and stack them to resemble a Hindu funerary pyre. For Ringo, the blanket is an extension of the body and a metaphor for the cycle of life. She points out that when we're first born, we're wrapped in bodies, and then upon death, we're wrapped in blankets, and then also upon our death. So they are, in a sense, our first and last skins. They're also symbols of warmth, comfort, and rest, but in this case, they signify the bodies that they once covered. So this work encourages us to reflect on the transient nature of life, but also to think about how after our bodily death, traces of us still remain. So let's talk about the third theme in the exhibition, ritual, myth, meditation, communing with deities. This section of the exhibition explores how, through mythology, we often get closer to an understanding of some of the spiritual ideas that we cannot fully grasp. And often, gods with human or animal attributes represent these invisible forces or phenomena of the natural world. And this, I think, will be evident in many of the works in the gallery that include animals and natural themes and other creatures. This section also explores the practice of meditation in ritual, and in some case embodied in the very act of art making itself, art making as a meditative practice or art making as a ritual practice. And we're specifically interested in how this practice of meditation and ritual serves as a way of communing with the divine. So masks in many cultures, as you know, have been worn as a way of transporting people out of the earthly realm onto a more spiritual plane. And this is Japanese artist Motohiko Odani, who plays with the tradition of no theater and no mask specifically. And by literally revealing what is beneath the surface of the mask, he makes half of the masks anatomical. So Odani's masks will be paired with, I believe, about 17 masks from our collection. A majority of them are from Japan and do relate to performative traditions in Japan, but they are all, from a number of countries throughout Asia. And again, this is a grouping that is about stimulating those relationships that we might not have seen or felt or experienced before, not only among themselves within the group, but also with the Odani's masks and the other work that might be around them. Also relating to ritual, Adrian Wong is creating an installation that explores principles of feng shui. Adrian's a really interesting guy, and he will be speaking here on May 11th. And I'll definitely be there. He's a very funny speaker, very, very smart guy, and I would encourage you all to come and hear him in action. Adrian came to the museum a number of times to meet with local feng shui practitioners. And he studied and he read all the different schools of thought surrounding feng shui. He has a background in research-based psychology. He has, I believe, some sort of graduate degree from Stanford. Before he went to Yale Art School, he thought he was going to go into psychology. So he has this very interesting research-based, very ritualistic practice that combines those two influences. And what he does is he hones in on a subject and he really dives deep. What he did for our museum is he met with these local practitioners and then followed their advice based on their readings of the gallery space. And he created 2 rooms within Osher Gallery that we'll be constructing. And I apologize that we don't have better visuals to describe this, but this is just his Google SketchUp idea that he sent to me on email a few months back. And I'll do my best to describe it. So we have 2 spaces, and one follows the principles and the guidelines given to him by the feng shui experts to create an auspicious space, and the other intentionally breaks those guidelines to create an inauspicious space. So this is really an open-ended piece. Adrian asks viewers to spend time in each space, walk through them, see if you feel different effects in the auspicious one versus the inauspicious one. Do you feel positive or negative effects? Do you feel nothing? He's really letting you make your own judgment about this practice. So inside of in one of his rooms, he's going to include works from our Korean ritual ceramics collection. And this is, I think, it adds a layer of complexity to his work because he's highlighting the ritualistic aspect of his practice, but also the work itself. But he's also trying to make this space look as much like the Asian Art Museum as he can. So unlike the rest of the exhibition, which will have bright yellow labels and look very contemporary, you're going to see our gray cases, the works installed exactly how we have them on the 2nd and 3rd floors. He wants it to feel like the Asian Art Museum and to kind of replicate that sense of energy that we have in our galleries. Following Adrian's piece, you'll see a painting and also this sculpture by Indian artist Jejunus Panda. What you see on the left here is a snake-like form made of sewage pipes. They're plastic sewage pipes. And they've been adorned in a few areas with some plastic flowers and signs of life, like you see on the right. So Jejunus uses animals as actors or storytellers in his pieces. And he's also going to be creating a painting for us as well that you'll also see this come to life. But what he's doing is fusing the traditional symbolism of the snake in India, which as you know is rich, with contemporary issues. And what this work is talking about is, in his own words, the ecology of life and death. So he's created an Ouroboros, a snake that's eating its own tail, which is that symbol of kind of cycles and symbols and ecology. And he's talking about pollution, he's talking about overdevelopment, and our survival in the contemporary world, which, as I'm sure you know, is very poignant topic in overdeveloped parts of India at the moment. So this sculpture will be paired with traditional Indian miniature paintings from our collection that include serpent imagery. Similarly to Jejunus, this is a work by Pakistani artist Adila Suleiman, who also uses creatures and elements of the natural world in her pieces. Adila explores themes of contemporary Pakistan, often from a very personal place. And if you look at her practice more broadly, she often deals with unnecessary death in her work. And an example, just as a way to describe this, is she has a series of motorcycle helmets that are beautiful. They're just exquisitely painted. They have semi-precious stones on them. And what these works are about is she has experienced in Pakistan a problem where families of 4 will ride on a single motorcycle, and only the father, who is of course driving the motorcycle, will be wearing a helmet. And the women hang off the back. It's like the man, and then the kids sit, and then there's the mom on the back. And the mom typically doesn't have a helmet on, and she's wearing flowing garments and scarves, and there's a terrible problem with their garments getting caught in the back wheel of the motorcycle, leading to the unnecessary death of that woman. So her motorcycle helmets are about that. And yes, they are about death, but they're also about the realities of contemporary life. And one woman and a mother of 2 kids experience trying to understand that scary reality. So I wanted to explain that because I think it's a good primer for talking about this piece. It's called Untitled Peacock with Missiles. Mommy and I knew about this work on the bottom, and this is the bottom left here. It's an installation shot from her gallery in New York City where this work was shown last year. We started talking to Adila about showing something in the show because her work, it deals with death and the afterlife. It combines traditional techniques. Here you can see this metal work is very traditional. It's often used to adorn trucks and vehicles in Pakistan. And she also uses traditional motifs taken from nature. So she really piqued our interest. And as we started talking to her more and more, she said, you know, I think I need to add more elements for this show. And what she ended up adding, she sent us this drawing on the top here. She added more birds. She sees the birds as storytellers, which I think is very beautiful. It's that idea of and actually all of the animal imagery in this piece come from stories that her grandmother told her as a child. But what she's done is fuse these storytellers, so to speak, with missiles. You can see the peacocks are standing on missiles. And then in that center portion in the middle, just below those 2 serpents coming up, is a suicide jacket. So here we have a very sharp contrast. We have the beauty of the natural world, and we have it right alongside some terrible signs of death and destruction, and suicide and death, things that we don't often want to think about when we're strolling through an art exhibition. I wanted to talk a little bit more at length about this work because I want to make sure that our visitors understand what this is. This is not a glorification of death or martyrdom or suicide bombing. Certainly, I could see how some people might interpret it that way. And this is a case where I suggest going directly to the words of the artist. So I pulled up Adila's catalog and I brought it with me, and I thought I would read you one quote from her catalog that I think does the best to explain this piece and also to give you an example of how you might explain it to the visitors. She says, I quote, "The current turbulent political situation is ever present. It has taken over our existence. It's impossible not to think about it. In the past, what was happening in Bangladesh was not known to the people living in the other part of the country. But now you drop a bomb in the northwest of Pakistan or anywhere in the world, it's shown live on television. Death has come closer, at our threshold, in our living room. You can't ignore it. It is in your face. How can you not talk about it through your work?" So once you read that and you think about her words for a second, you realize that this is a very personal work. It's a work that combines memories of childhood with the realities of living in an Islamic state. It, I think, also deals with, in the context of her broader practice, ideas of the anxieties of raising a family in this environment. And in the end, as much as I've struggled with this piece and really wrapping my own hands around it, I think it's quite beautiful and very, very brave. And in a show that deals with Asian contemporary art and deals with ideas of life and death, we felt that we had to go here, but in a way that's very respectful and that is really truly about great art. So this is the painting I showed earlier by Prabhavati Mapayo. She is also a female artist working in India, Bangalore. And this is the artist I talked about, Agnes Martin, relating to. And again, here we see that idea of meditation. This is a meditative piece of art. It's intentionally repetitive. It intentionally draws you in. It's about contemplation and of the inner mind, an inward expression of spirituality. Okay, so moving to our last theme. This is a theme that will only be shown in, it'll run or be shown in its entirety in Tadeuchi Gallery and will be on view for a full Tadeuchi run, which is 6 months. But like the other themes in the exhibition, there is a lot of overlap with other works. So this theme of sacred mountain encountering the gods, I think you're going to see mountains all over this exhibition. And yes, they all relate to this theme in a very dynamic way. This gallery brings together works demonstrating the interconnectivity of mountain symbolism throughout Asia. It takes inspiration from the fact that many cultures in Asia view mountains as sacred places where spiritual communion with deities can take place. The solitude on the mountaintop offers a space for reflection with nature that some feel can bring you closer to the celestial realm. And a prominent example of this, of course, is Mount Meru, a sacred site in Hindu, Buddhist, and other Asian cosmologies. This is a painting by young Japanese artist Aki Kondo. Aki is just now, I think last week, finished her painting degree and is just now moving to Japan to Tokyo to begin her life as an artist working full-time. The bold and dynamic brushstrokes of Kondo's painting of the mountain and the mountain deities reveal the power within the landscape that she feels personally. She wants her viewer to sense this power of the mountains to shape and give life to the earth, as well as their role as a mythological space where the humans can commune with the vast spiritual realm. The motivation for this particular painting was the earthquake and tsunami of March 2011. We contacted her about creating a work for this show just weeks before the earthquake and tsunami happened. This is what Aki wrote to me in an email. Quote, "That day, when I felt the earth shake so much I thought it would never stop, I was in Yamagata, which isn't far from the quake's epicenter, although the tsunami didn't reach us." Aki was deeply affected by the loss of so many lives on the other side of the mountain. And that experience is very much what this work is about. It's about how the mountains have a profound power to both protect and to destroy. The power and the allure of the mountains is similarly apparent in this Japanese painting of Peach Blossom Spring. So this Chinese legend, as you might know, tells the story of a fisherman who accidentally sails into a river lined with peach blossoms, and at the end of the river he finds a narrow cave that leads him into a beautiful and peaceful utopian village, separated entirely from the cares of the world. Another contemporary artist featured in Tadeuchi is Lin Chuanchu. He grew up in a farming household in Taiwan, and as a child spent a lot of time roaming the mountains. He says that he knows the mountains of his particular region of Taiwan like the back of his hand. He's very well versed in calligraphy, Buddhism, nature, poetry, and painting. And his mountainous landscapes that he creates, these are quite large paintings, are what he describes as visualizations of the inner spirit. These paintings are about the artist's personal connection to the mountains as a place of self-reflection. For him, the mountains are where transcendence can happen. He's also trying to create or document his own meditative dialogue. And in doing this, he's tapping into classical Chinese aesthetics and that visual language, and their emphasis on interpreting landscapes to reveal both their visual and their spiritual qualities. This sense of retreating to a mountainous landscape for meditation and inspiration is similarly the subject of this northern Indian painting from our collection. It's from the 18th century, and it's of the Prophet Muhammad praying at the cave at Hira. So let's go back downstairs for a moment, out of Tadeuchi, back down to leaving Osher Gallery. From here, visitors are going to be directed upstairs into the collection galleries, and we're hoping that visitors will go to the third floor to South Asia to start. In each region of our collection, each geographical region, we have chosen an artist that comes from that region to create a work or to install a work that relates to the themes of the exhibition, but also speaks to the works that are around them in the collection galleries. So again, these works, they talk about the themes that are in the show, but in a very overlapping way. Some of them fit into more than one theme. But what we're hoping to do here is shed new light on both works. Let the dialogues happen. Our curators have also selected works that are already on view in the collection galleries, and they'll be highlighted with a yellow Phantoms of Asia label for their connections to the exhibition. So I'll just run for you, this is a map, two maps, third floor and second floor, to give you a sense of the number of works that we'll have on view. It's basically one, in some cases, two artists per region. And we tried to kind of stagger them throughout the second and third floors. At the top of the escalator, you'll see an installation of bamboo trees by the Taiwanese and Paris-based artist Charwei Tsai. And Charwei's going to come here and using calligraphy, she's going to write the 262 characters of the Heart Sutra repeatedly on the canes of the bamboo. As the exhibition goes on and over time, the bamboo will eventually wither and die. And in doing so, the artist feels that she's kind of articulating or exemplifying some of the ideas of non-attachment and emptiness expressed in the Heart Sutra. In South Asia, we'll have two works by Indian artist Rakib Shah. He lives in London. His work, it really combines a variety of influences from all over the world and throughout time. He comes from a Kashmir-based family of mercantile traders, and he uses a porcupine quill to paint very meticulously on the surface of his canvas. He also embellishes them with sequins and glitter and other fantastic, bedazzling items, and creates these otherworldly landscapes that include elements of reality, but they're also very imaginative and out there. The more you look at this painting, the more you see. It's one of those works that really sucks you in. What interested us about his work, again, was that looking back in time to traditional Asian motifs, but also he's looking all over the world. Like, for example, I see influence here of Northern European masters such as Bosch or Cranach or Holbein. He actually, in some of his work, has citations from some of these paintings. In West Asia, we'll have a new work created for this show by Poran Jinchi. Poran is a Persian artist based in New York, and she is from the holy city of Mashhad, Iran. She went there and collected these prayer tablets and these prayer stones or more, and she decorates them using this Persian glaze. And in doing so, she's trying to highlight the work's spiritual focus on God, or a spiritual focus on God during prayer. In Japan, we will have hand-carved life-size flowers by Yoshihiro Suda. And Suda will be arriving here on, a week or so before the show opens, and will be hand-placing these flowers throughout the galleries himself. We don't know where they're going to go yet. What he's trying to do, it's not so much about creating flowers that replicate nature. What he really wants to do is to create encounters that are unexpected. He wants you to walk through the gallery and notice something out of the corner of your eye and ask yourself, how does that change my surroundings? What does that do for my experience? Obviously, there's a connection here to netsuke and other traditional craft techniques, but really he wants the viewer to meditate for a moment on the natural world, on the cycle of life, and our own place within that cycle. Korean artist Bae Young-won, I mentioned this table earlier, will be in the Korean galleries. And he, again, uses his brainwaves to create these topographical maps of the inner mind. He's really searching for the divine within his own mind. But in doing so, he's linking, again, his own mind, his internal self through his brainwaves, to the natural world around him by reconstituting the inner mind through landscape forms. Although this work is in the Korean galleries, you can see how it relates to the sacred mountain theme and also to broader themes of microcosmos and the self and the macrocosmos, the universe. So we've talked about a lot of art. One thing I haven't addressed is this notion of phantoms. Who or what are these phantoms? Like the exhibition itself, we chose this word because of its many meanings and associations. In some cases, phantoms are objects from the past, which once viewed in the present and reinterpreted by contemporary artists, offer new perspectives and experiences of that past. We can also think of phantoms as spiritual energy that finds resonance and interconnections throughout many cultures of Asia. Or even, we could think about phantoms as invisible presences, references, citations, touch points, moments, rituals, ceremonies of the past that are not fixed or unchanging, but instead have continued life in the present. In this way, phantoms emerge through the traditional and contemporary works in the exhibition, evident in the show's themes, that find expression in objects throughout time and across cultures. So to pull it all together, this exhibition is thematic, it's cross-historical, it's cross-cultural, it's open-ended, and in many ways, I believe that this exhibition is universal. It explores questions that have been asked by people all over the world and throughout history. We are simply framing the questions within the Asian region. This exhibition is not comprehensive. We're not talking about every Asian understanding of the universe. We're not talking about every religion or tradition or culture. It's not chronological, and it's not didactic. And what I mean by this is that we want to teach our visitors something new. Of course, we want them to learn. But we are primarily interested in sparking new connections, perspectives, and experiences. We want to focus on the experience of this art. We also want the viewers to make these connections on their own. We want to set up the circumstances for them to have that aha moment. To do this, I find that the best approach is to describe each theme and then let the contemporary objects and the artists speak from themselves when possible. Hopefully during my talk today, you've begun to notice some connections and overlaps, as well as some differences among objects and how they together allow us to explore our own place in the cosmos. Maybe a certain work that I showed today reminded you of a personal experience. Maybe it reminded you of another work you saw recently at a museum. All of these connections and ideas are truly what makes the art dynamic and interesting. And remember, you already have all the tools you need. Thank you very much.